Carrie Murray Nellis with Abiding Love Adoption Agency. We got Vicki Coles, who is also with Abiding Love, Director of Birth Mother Advocacy, and the very cool Claire Hudson with Project Dawn is joining us. So last week we did kind of a thing of us in the hot seat with a whole bunch of different birth moms, and it was awesome. And we really enjoyed having like this candid discussion. And so Claire and I are new Instagram friends. So I was like, hey, let's do something. And it was funny because we were talking on the phone last week, and I was like, we've got to stop talking because we need to like do this this way. So and I felt so rude, but at any rate, it is what it is. So.
No, I do that all the time. I start talking. I'm like, wait, we need to save this.
Yes, we got to save this. So at any rate, I am, so I'm just, saying we're just starting and wanted to kind of dive in. Claire, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Everybody knows about us and we're nobody cares. So.
Yeah. So my name is Claire. I am an adoptee. So I'm 34 years old. And I was a domestic infant adoptee in 1985 from a closed private adoption. So that's the lens that I come from. I find that's often helpful for people. Mm-hmm. That's my experience. And I don't do this kind of advocacy work full time. So I do other things full time, but this is my passion project. And I'm very passionate about adoption. I love the adoption community for reasons such as this, just getting to talk to folks about adoption and kind of like my views on it, and just learning how to be a better partner with adoption professionals so we can like elevate the experience for everybody. Absolutely. And I run a social media platform called Project Dawn. Mm-hmm. And really the purpose, it's newer. So the purpose of my platform is really just to share my story. And hopefully it resonates with people. And just kind of adds another layer to my experience.
Cool. Yeah, that's it. Well, thanks for joining us. When did you know that you were adopted, like growing up, or was there like a moment where they told you were adopted? Like, how did this?
No. So I knew I was adopted always, which I think like people often ask me, like, because I talk a lot about things that adoptive parents should be doing differently. So people are like, is there something they did well? I'm like, oh my gosh, my parents did so much well. And that is one of the things they did really well, is that I always knew I was adopted. And so I don't remember being told. And I think that's really good, is that I don't have that moment where I remember being sat down. I think it was just interwoven into my story since I can, since forever.
Yeah.
Which I think is great. And I think that leads to like a good foundation for like a healthy identity as an adoptee, in my opinion.
Was it a open adoption? Like fill us in on those ends on that.
Oh yeah. So no, I was from a closed adoption. And so so that's also very important. I think that we sorry, my computer keeps like moving. I apologize. To level set on what my definition of a closed adoption is. Mm-hmm. So when I say closed adoption, I mean no information exchanged whatsoever. No name of my birth mother, no, no information, meaning like I didn't even know any type of like non-identifying information, no cultural information. My mother, and when I eventually found her, like she is at least half Cuban, mm-hmm. and she has some Spanish and Italian heritage. None of that was ever communicated to me, or even my parents. So really we just had nothing. And so I think that's not ideal in my opinion, but yeah, so that's the lens I come from regarding closed adoption, is that I know that now there's adoptions that are closed, but they're closed because of a choice, meaning that, like contact wise might be closed. And mine was closed.
Yeah,
like
no
nothing.
information.
Yeah.
Do you know if that was, I mean, back then that's just how it was, do you know if that was at the choice of your parents, your adoptive parents, or if that was your birth mom's decision? Do you have any idea of any of that?
I don't. And so my story is a little, I don't know if this was common in the 80s. I have no frame of reference, but my mom, I was actually matched through my mother's doctor, my adoptive mother's doctor,
Gotcha.
um, who my birth mother was also a patient at that practice.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so my mother struggled with infertility,
Mm-hmm.
and she was seeing a doctor for infertility, and it came to her knowledge that there was a woman there that was looking to place her child for adoption, and would they be interested? And
Mm-hmm.
so they didn't ask questions,
Mm-hmm.
which my mother and I talked about that a lot, but they didn't ask questions because they, like many parents, I feel, especially when you bring infertility narrative into the equation, were very, very desperate to become parents, very much wanted this. And at that point, my mom didn't care about what her child, boy, girl, race, culture, like she didn't care about that special. She just like wanted to be a mom. And so she didn't ask questions. I'm not sure if my birth mother asked questions about them or not. I haven't been able to communicate with her. So it's unclear whether she knew who they were or
Right.
anything like that. I would like to think maybe there was some information about them, but I don't know.
I mean, but this is real life. This is really,
Yeah.
how it is. So, so
Oh,
they
it
didn't
was.
go through an adoption agency. They worked through their doctor. Is that right?
Yeah, so they worked through their doctor to like get them to be matched,
Mm-hmm.
and then it moved to like a private attorney,
Gotcha.
like facilitation, I guess is what you would call it. Like in modern terms, it would be kind of like a private adoption facilitator or something. I don't know if that's the right term.
We'll
Yeah.
get into the difference of
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, adoption facilitators. We'll get into that. That's a
Yeah,
different.
I don't know if that's right or not, but yeah, that's how it happens.
No worries. Vicky, you're being really silent over there, which is scaring me.
No, I'm just listening. But I did comment a while ago when you said that's the way, that's the way it was, unfortunately. And
Yeah.
I'm sure, I mean, since you've been doing this, I'm not going to go in the history of adoption unless you need me to, but, up until 1940, adoptions were open. And then from the 40s to like the 90s, they were closed. And, it's a whole big mess, but it just, I don't know. I don't want to like take over and lecture. So let me just listen and let questions come, and then we'll just go from there. How about that? Because I don't know if you read my bio, but I'm actually an adoptive mom.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I
And so people kind of find it interesting that me as an adoptive mom, that I fight so hard for the birth parents. They think that that's just the weirdest thing. That's one of the biggest things that I have the biggest
That's what
struggle.
they see is the weirdest thing about you.
Well, no, that's just one of them. In the field, let's put it that way. Let's not go into other things right now.
But yeah, so that was kind of how I came to be, I guess. And it is really hard as an adoptee. And I think that's why I had initially reached out, because I had read your post that got a lot of traction that one day, the co-parents.
I upset a lot of people.
Yeah, you made a lot of people
upset. Well, I mean, I do, but I didn't mean to upset that group of people. Does that make sense?
Correct. No, yeah. I understood where the post was coming from. But I reached out and I said something about how relationships in adoption go both ways, meaning that at first, now Claire's opinion, at first, we're very much focused on this relationship that's evolving between expectant mother and hopeful adoptive family. We're making sure that everyone's on the same page. We're working through all of that kind of stuff, home studies, paperwork, counseling, post-placement contact agreements, all of that. And we're all doing this with this child in mind. We're all acting in the best interest of the child. And that's very much true. I think where it stops ringing true to me is when an adoptee ages. And that's where I said something about it's a two-way street, meaning at what point do my rights start? And at what point do I, as an adoptee, get a say in when, let's just pretend open adoption. When do I get a say in my own post-placement contact agreement if we're dealing with like an open adoption? And in a closed adoption, especially for adoptees in my generation who are struggling right now for open records, is when does my birth mother's right to privacy end? And that might sound really harsh, and it's not meant to sound harsh, but it's meant to just say we are adults who have rights that are being they're not being honored, and our access to our records, even our vital records, so like original birth certificates, are denied by most states. I think there's only like 10 states right now that offer like unrestricted access to original birth certificates. Which is crazy to me, but I understand where it comes from. Like, I understand where that comes from. And to me, it's rooted in this very, very big fear that not only expectant mothers, birth mothers have, but also adoptive families have about releasing this information. And so, yeah, I think that we as a community, we always talk about the triad, right? We always talk about birth mother, adoptee, and adoptive parent, but we leave out probably one of the most important voices in the community are the professionals. And so without partnering with like-minded professionals, none of the movement towards open records, adoptee rights, better communication, more ethical adoption language, like none of that is going to matter unless we have adoption professionals that are with us in the fight.
Oh yeah, we've got to step up. I mean, we've got a huge responsibility to step up. And going back to that post that everybody got upset about, it's a hard place because we as adoption professionals, as agencies, as attorneys, as social workers, we have failed birth mothers, we have failed adoptees. We failed y'all. And what we are trying to do is I can't change the past. I can't fix that. But what I can change is how we are doing it right now. How Vicki and I are doing Abiding Love right now, how we are with every expectant mom and birth mom, and making that move forward. And so we can make those changes. And so it's a hard place to be because there are so many people that have been hurt and have the right to be angry and have the right to want to voice that. I think I get frustrated because people are like, well, it's your fault. I'm like, well, I didn't do the adoption. It's not my fault. But, so I can't take that on. I have done things wrong in the adoption. I mean, I've learned the way that we did adoptions. I've been an adoption attorney for 15 years. The way that I did that 15 years ago to today, I mean, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we did that. But it was a different world. It's evolving and we're getting better and we've got a whole long way to go.
And that's one thing that I wanted to say. I mean, it's real easy to criticize adoptive parents from the 50s and 60s and 80s, and it's real easy to criticize the adoption professionals at the time. But when there's a norm, when you try to change culture, when there's something that everybody believes they are genuinely doing for the best of their child, I think we just have to be careful, because if I was a professional back then or an adoptive mom that long ago, and somebody told me I was going to damage you, my child, if I shared certain things with you, and if I did certain things, and somebody put that in my head, and even as a professional, that was put in my head because this is the norm, because this is the healthiest way to do. I just think that in some form of this, we have to also extend grace, because yes, there are unethical people out there. Yes, there are people who do things that are just out of the meanness of their heart. But I think that the majority of the adoption professionals from the 60s, 70s, 80s, I really think, based on the limited research they had then, the psychologists, and just everything that was going on then, I don't think the majority of people were being evil. I think that they did what they thought was right, and we've come out that it's not right anymore, and it caused a lot more damage. I mean, because if I was one of those professionals, I'd be feeling horrible right now if I'd have been a part of those adoptions. Do you know what I mean? Like, knowing that I caused some kind of damage to an adoptee when it was not my heart's intent. Now, I do think that the birth mom and how she was treated, I would love to interview adoption professionals from the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, and just like even anonymously, and say, hey, what started this trend? Like, where she was kind of like a commodity, like you took the baby and you ran. Like, what was behind that? What was the mindset behind that? I would love to know that stuff, but I mean, I don't know anybody would come out right now and tell us anything for fear of being
willing to contact me.
Yeah.
We'll do it anonymously.
Because we messed up, but like Carrie said, there's things that we can do to alter the future. And you speaking out, and us speaking out, and birth moms speaking out. I mean, there's definitely things that we can do to alter the future and try to help repair the past where we can. And I do think having access to your original documentation is part of helping to repair the past.
Yeah.
I'm a huge advocate for everybody having their original birth certificate. All my kids I have 3. All my kids have their original birth certificates.
That's amazing. And I love when I hear that, because and that's what I think is so difficult to swallow, especially for adoptees that are in states that are still limiting access, is that in general, the adoption community agrees that this is something we need to do, but yet, I mean, we won't make this into politics, but in our current
thing, we can throw that back on Carrie.
We're not, we can't get these laws passed that are clean. But not semi-related to that is just, I feel like sometimes, and I think you guys would be good to kind of like talk to this, is I get a lot of pushback when I say that, and I say this as an analogy, not as like, ooh, this is how I like deeply feel as a person, because I very much like respect birth mothers, expectant mothers. I think it's such a hard spot and a hard place and a hard decision, and just all of the things, right? Mm-hmm. Is if we know open adoption is, in general, I won't say always, because that might not always be the case, in general is better for an adoptee as they age, why does the industry still agree to facilitate closed adoptions? And maybe that's something you guys could talk to. I know, Carrie, we kind of touched on it a little when we talked on the phone. And I just think it would be helpful.
That was right before we got to stop talking. We got to stop talking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you made the point, Claire, you said your viewpoint on this issue is, go for it.
Oh, so my viewpoint on closed versus open is I don't believe that the adoption industry should be facilitating closed adoptions, period. And that, when I say closed, it goes back to my original definition, no information exchanged. I think there's a way to release a child's vital record, their original birth certificate and their information, without having to facilitate an open relationship piece. I think all adoptions should be open, but if we're not going to be able to do that, we should still at least exchange information. That's my opinion.
Go for it, Vicki. I know you're chomping.
I want to hear from Vicki.
Well, I think that one, you want me to speak from what I think about birth moms wanting it closed or adoption professionals? Because I got opinions on both. So you just tell me which way to swing my bet.
I want both.
Yeah, both. Go for it.
Yeah, I love.
Well, one is working with expectant moms. I've been doing that for around 13 years now, almost 13 years, not quite. And one of the things that when I meet with them, there's several different reasons why they want to close. One, they're ashamed. They're ashamed of where they are in life at the moment. They're ashamed of what has brought them to this place. They're ashamed that they feel like a failure, that they can't be there for their own child, that they're even having to consider this, or they're in an abusive relationship, or they're addicted, or their parents will get upset with them, or whatever it is. You know what I mean? But I think that for me, and this is again personal opinion, I've not done any official research on it, but I think a lot of them, when I first meet with them and they tell me they want closed, it's because of they have so much low self-esteem in their worth of who they are as a human being that they think they're doing their child a favor if their child doesn't know how broken they are. And having to help them work through that and let them know that they are a worthy person just for breathing. It doesn't have anything to do with what you have or haven't done. One of my biggest things is I tell people all the time, this is like the cleaned up version. This is like post Jesus, because before Jesus, I'm just glad there was no social media. And so,
and by the way, you clean up really well because the
I know. I'm just saying,
going on. So
I'm like, I have done some stupid things, man, that I'm very glad there was no social media when I was doing them. And so, yeah, I mean, so, it's first for me working with them is making sure, like, it doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter where you are. What matters is you're their mama. What matters is they're going to look like you and the birth father. What matters is if they can draw and you can draw, they get that from you, and they need to know that stuff. And so even going through that, I have some mamas who change their minds. And then I have some who are like, well, I just can't, I'm not ready. And it usually does go back to some sort of trauma in their life. I'm just going to be honest with you. Some sort of trauma in their life has made them, where grief and loss and just how they process all of that and how they deal with the hard stuff, they just run right now. And it's not because they don't love you. I would give my right arm. I promise you, your birth mama loved you. There is no doubt in my mind that she loved you. Because I've worked with too many women from all different walks of life, all different ages, all different ethnicities, all different socioeconomic, all different education levels. She loved you, but something in her head convinced her that you would be better off without her and knowing any knowledge of her. And so with that being said, the adoption professional, why some of them don't push hard enough, it's cleaner and easier for them. Mm-hmm. Because to enter into that realm, to try to tell that mama that she's worthy to be known, it's work, man. And it's work, and it's crying, and it's being called a few choice names.
You've never been called a few choice names. What are you talking about?
I've been called a few choice names. Basically tell me I didn't know anything about what life was really about, and you know what I mean. But just it takes work, and it's a commitment to her, and it is a commitment to the adoptee in a different way, because it's knowing that adoptee needs to know their origin and needs to know their story. But when you meet somebody who doesn't want it, you really have to dig in and like build a relationship with them to encourage them to want it and to understand, like I said, they're worthy just for the basic fact that you lived inside of them. Mm-hmm. So they're worthy. And I think that's my opinion. I think that it all stems from shame. And I mean, like my kids have open adoptions, but one of my sons, he's talked to his birth mom on Facebook. Very, very, very open with his paternal side of the family. But when we had the opportunity to try to meet her and somebody went to her on our behalf, he came back to us and he said, she loves you, but she's not ready.
Yep.
And I mean, like, he said that she just broke, like her whole face just broke. like, and he said, look, and because we, we sent something for her so she would know that we love her and we don't judge her, and, and he loves her, and, but she's not ready. And, but that has nothing to do with my son.
Right.
That has everything to do with her heart and her value of worth. That's my opinion. I think she thinks that she's not worthy to be loved by him. And that's just not true.
One of
I don't know if
the
that
issues
answers the
that,
question.
yeah,
That's how I feel about it.
one
No,
of the things that we were talking about, Claire, and you started to hit on it, was the post-adoption contact. So do you mind if we go back to that a little bit?
Oh, well, I want to know first what she thought about my answer. Were you, I mean, like.
No, I really appreciate that, because I think that sometimes, at least in my view, and I know you guys are a different agency in this regard, is
Crazy agency.
Yeah, we often think of expectant mothers coming in with this preconceived notion of they either want closed or open, and usually closed is closed, right? And there's kind of like a, okay,
It's
closed.
easy.
Yeah. And there's no like, well, here's the benefits of open adoption, not only to you, maybe not now what place you're at now, but down the road, because I don't think that they understand, or maybe they do, but the permanency of what a closed adoption does. And that is very difficult to, in my opinion, like reverse the impacts of a closed adoption.
I agree.
And so I think that it's great what you said, Vicki, that yeah, we're still going to facilitate closed adoptions because ultimately that's her choice, but we are going to try to the best we can in that moment to counsel them on the benefits of openness. And if they change their mind, great. If they don't, you're not going to turn your back on, and that's not what I'm implying. Like, I don't think any agency should be ever turning their back on expectant mothers, no matter their choice.
Right.
But I think that that's what all agencies should be doing. I think they should all be focused on, when it comes to making the decision between closed and open, like providing that education piece and just sitting with them and saying, you are welcome to choose a closed adoption. However, just like, when you're relinquishing your parental rights, when you're closing an adoption, that not that you can't go back and reopen it, but it is a lot harder. There's a lot more like legal red tape to get through and all of this stuff. And I don't know. So I liked your answer. I thought that was perfect. And I think that I agree. I think that's a lot of the reason is that when we're talking about adoption, I mean, it's born from this like very broken place. If we were talking about, everyone's in a great place in their life, and we wouldn't probably be having adoption to begin with.
Right.
And so I think that you're coming out of this like place of shame and guilt, and so I think it is a really tough choice. But no, I liked that answer a lot.
And one thing I want to go back to when you said that when expectant mothers come in, I think one of the things that adoption professionals can do a lot better is when an expectant mother comes in, and this is where you as a community and birth mothers in a community, there needs to be this massive education about what women should be asking when they go see an agency, because they look to us as the adoption professional is the expert, whether it's the adoptive parents or the child or the expectant mom. And so I do think that we need to be held accountable for, if somebody comes in and says, oh, you want closed, like you said, like we need to be held accountable to have the conversation. Now I will say when I have people who tell me, no, I definitely want closed, one of the things I try to get them to do, we still, on the adoptive family side, it's open.
Yeah.
So essentially what we tell them is that whenever she decides to walk back in the door,
You're telling our secrets.
whatever, your door has to be open.
Right.
Like, as an adoptive family, your door always has to be open. So one of the things that I try to do if somebody says they're just not ready is I ask them to set up a completely separate email. And I ask the adoptive parents two things. One, they either send pictures and letters to our office, and the expectant mom, birth mom, knows that when she's ready, they'll be sitting at our office. And even if it's 10 years from now, I'll send her 10 years worth of pictures. One of the things that we've had more success with is when she's ready, she can open up that email. And so I'm a huge advocate of getting her, if she will do it, to create a completely separate email and encouraging the adoptive parents, even if it's a one-sided conversation, send updates, send pictures. So when she is ready, if it's 2:00 in the morning or if it's 5 years from now, she goes and opens up that email and she knows all about her child. And maybe because of the consistency of the adoptive parent, she will have the courage to know and actually believe that she is worthy of being loved, and will finally reach out through email. So that's one of the things that we do, even when but ours are never truly closed, though. That's really not true. I mean, because our kids always know their first names. They know their birth family's first names. If they don't know their last names, they know a physical description. Like what you're talking about closed, we don't really do those sort of placements at all. Like at all. Ours is really what I guess at Abiding Love, what we consider closed would be like what I just told you.
No contact.
No contact. Like the emails go, but you don't get a response back, and you just kind of hope and wait one day she's going to respond back. Do you see what I mean? Like, but we don't really truly have, because we send with the adoptive family. We always get multiple copies of the original birth certificate. We keep one in the office, and Carrie can correct me, but one goes to the court, one goes to the adoptive family, one goes back to the birth mother, so she has a copy of the original birth certificate. And I think we keep one just in case somebody loses it, and we can make a copy of it. But again, Carrie,
so many birth certificates.
So let me just hush and let Carrie answer that.
Well, we really do believe it's important regarding the birth certificate. So we have multiple copies. It's funny because when we first started doing this, Vital Records was like, you don't need so many copies. And I'm like, yes, we do. We do need it. And I am paying you and I have the authorization. So give me all these copies. Exactly. But yeah, we do that. Now we have the mom sign a release saying that, she understands that an original birth certificate will be given, to her and to the child, because there are some states, luckily none of the states, we're in Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. None of those states it's illegal to give that document, but just because it's the attorney and me, I want to make sure that, we don't get sued for giving out.
She likes to kill trees. Don't let her lie. If she can create a form to kill a tree, that's what she's going to do.
What can I say? But my assistant Gail here makes me recycle, so it's all good. But at any rate, so we do that. So yeah, so the birth mom gets a copy, the adoptive parents get a copy. When we send the original birth certificate, and then the birth certificate after the adoption's done, we send 2 of the original, one for the adoptive parents and one to keep for the adoptee, for them to have whenever it's time or however. And of course, we keep one as well. And we also have in that document, basically if she comes to us, we have the right to give, if for some reason the adoptee never received their copy, we can give one to them. So that's important. I really hate that there are some states that it's illegal to do that. I would love to get with the attorneys in those states. I did a post a while back about you should be getting your original birth certificate. And, there's some people who are like, well, we can't in our state. I would love to get with those attorneys because I am quite sure that we can find a way around that.
Create a form to sign.
Exactly. I mean, in Florida, yeah, in Florida, we were talking to our Florida attorney because I'm not licensed there, and they're like, well, you can't do that. And I'm like, well, I can create a form. They're like, well, then I guess you can. I'm like, thank you. So, I mean, I don't really think it's that hard. I can't speak to every state. I'm not an attorney in every state, only the state of Georgia. But I really think that we as attorneys should be working harder to be thinking how to work within the law, but there's always loopholes, and to make sure that, we're appreciating privacy. And then also legislatively making, recommendations for the laws to change in that, because you're right, as an adoptee, it's ridiculous. You should have that. And it's important for adoption professionals to be getting those original birth certificates before the adoption is finalized. Because once the adoption is finalized and I send that new form to Vital Records, it's done. It's done. And even in the state of Georgia, it's done. They cannot. But that's why it's so important to us to utilize this time where we can, to get what we need so we can give to you and to the birth parents. So.
Yeah. And I think that that's really an important distinction, especially if there's other adoption professionals that will watch this back, is that so I was a Florida adoptee, so obviously laws have changed, but because we did not receive an original birth certificate prior to finalization, all of my records are sealed, and so permanently sealed. And so I think that one of the things that professionals can do, like you mentioned, to kind of like work around this system is requesting those copies up front. And I don't think when I mention this, I've mentioned that exact thing you said before. I'm like, well, why aren't you just getting them before finalization? Like, what's the big deal? I mean, I know not what's the big deal, but if we know that you're not going to have contact and the parties have already agreed to like a no contact rule, then what is the big problem with just releasing the original birth certificate to the birth mother and to the adoptee via their adoptive family? And they're like, well, we just don't do that. And I'm like, but you could, like, you can, like, and so if we can, in my opinion, if you can, you should. And so I think that that's really beneficial, especially because, like I said, I don't think a lot of folks understand that when it's done, it's done. If you don't have it, it's sealed away somewhere.
And I don't know a state that is different. I mean, even though you might be able to open up your records from the court, I don't know any vital records, any state vital records that will reopen your vital record form. Now, there are some states, and I think it's pretty cool, that on the birth certificate after the adoption, you can still have on there your birth parents' information. I think that's awesome, personally. I would love to see more. Yeah, so there's like, I think maybe 2 or 3 states. So Vicki, you and I need to add that to our list, and
you need to add that to your list.
Right. But Vicki, I don't think we've ever had a birth mom or expectant mom when we've talked to them about it, even if they wanted a closed adoption. I don't think we have never had someone say, absolutely, I do not want anybody else to get this birth certificate. I don't want my child to. I've never heard that.
I haven't had that either. I mean, I just haven't. Everybody, that's something that I've actually found out, I think helps our birth moms. It's just, I mean, it makes it more real. And I mean, I don't know, I can't speak for them. I'd have to get one of them on here to talk about what it was like to get their original birth certificate. But for me, it's important to them. And they love the fact that it goes with their child. Like, love the fact that it goes with their child. So even, like I said, if they're not ready to have face-to-face contact and do FaceTime or text messaging and things like that, they're still happy to know that it's going forward. That's been my experience. I haven't had any, and even people who kind of, like we say, drop off for a little while, like we don't talk to them for a while, even those moms were still more than happy for that information to be passed forward. So, you know, I don't, like I said, I'm not a birth mom, so I can speak to what I've seen, but I can't speak to what it feels like, you know. But I mean, I love, one of the things that we do different also with Abiding Love, research has now come out. I'm not going to start busting out statistics on you, but research has come out that
we love.
I mean, I got them pulled up. I got them on another screen. But anyway,
This is
Adopting
why, Claire,
the
most
story.
people can't handle us.
Well, I mean, it's just like research now shows it's kind of neat because things that Carrie and I have been like advocating for and pushing for and fussing for, it's now like it's not just our opinion anymore. Like there's now actual research that's backing us up. And I didn't
Indicated.
research. I can't be tainted. I didn't taint it. You know what I'm saying? Like there's real research out there that backs up what we say. Like that open adoption is important, that adoptees knowing their origin is important to help to have a healthy identity, that, you know, that they need to know their story and the story needs to be cohesive. I mean, between the birth mom, the adoptive family, like this, it didn't need to be two different stories, and the adoption professional, like everybody needs to get on the same page and tell the same story, age appropriate details. You know, like I tell people all the time, my kids at 6 didn't know their story that my kid who's going to turn 18 in like 4 months, he knows details about his story he didn't know at 6, but I never lied to him.
Right.
There were just details that I just didn't share with him because at 6 years old, I mean, you can't even comprehend that. Your brain's not ready. You know what I mean?
Right.
So anyway, but
Claire, your post today.
Tell her what we have our adoptive families do now. Like it's part of our post-placement requirements to help protect the adoptee. Like we want, I think one of the things that makes me so passionate about all this is I have 3 adoptees. I want them to be confident. I want them to never be ashamed of their story. I want them to never be ashamed of their heritage or how God wove this family together. Like, I want them to be able to look people in the eye and be like, yeah, I was adopted. What's your problem? You know, like, I know my story. We're all good, you know. I want them to be strong and confident in who they are, in their identity, in their heritage, and all of that stuff. So it's a lot of the things that I think we do with adoptive couples, hopeful adoptive couples, and even adoptive couples, you know, that we haven't done the home study for, but when they come under our umbrella, is to try to educate them and make sure they know that every choice they make this point forward is going to affect their adoptee when they're 34 years old.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yay.
Claire, I wanted to touch base because your post today, one of the things you were talking about is how we kind of then also go into this hero story, and not making, you know, the story that we're telling our children and the adoptee, making her out to be either a villain or a hero. So I don't know if you want to talk about that, because that was a great post today.
Yeah. So I piggybacked on one of my other adoptee friends' posts. I don't know if her name's Hannah Matthews. She has a Instagram called Hey TRA. She's a transracial adoptee. And she had posted about explaining her adoption story to her son and how his response was, "That's sad." And it got me thinking, like, I've had this conversation with my daughter who's 5, and it takes you a little off guard. It catches you a little off guard, some kids, what they say, and you're just like, in the moment, you're just like, wow, like, yeah, you're right. And so I was explaining my adoption to my 5-year-old, and it was a long conversation. I obviously like pared it down for my post, but I had told her about my birth mother, and she said, well, Mommy, will we ever get to meet your first mommy? And I said, and in that moment, I like kind of freeze, because I don't know about you guys, but like, it's all of a sudden, like, all this stuff that I've ever been told, like, kind of flashes back, and I'm like, what did my parents say? You know what I mean? I'm like kind of going through, like, how should I explain this? And then I just like kind of stopped, and I was like, in my head, like, no, I'm not going to embellish this in a way that is untrue for me. And so I just simply told her, no, we can't meet her right now. We might not ever get to meet her. She might not be ready, or might not ever be ready, or something like that. And she just my daughter looked at me and she goes, I bet you really miss your mommy. And I just said, you know what, I do. And that it was just crazy to me, because in that moment, like, my 5-year-old child was giving me permission to grieve and miss a mother that I never got to meet, never got to know, never got to talk to. And it was so simple and so profound for me, because I feel like we don't give adoptees that right, meaning that we collectively, this community that we're talking to right now, you guys probably do, but in a generalized adoption community, we love a good hero story, and we love a good birth mom story about, she loves you so much, she's gonna make this big plan for you, and all of these things, which are so true. All of that is so true. But when that's the only thing we hear, it's very comforting. And I very much appreciated that narrative when I was a child, because what else is it more comforting than to know that you were loved and cared for, and the best decisions were being made for you. But it just leaves out that core piece of the space, just allowing the space. And in my case, it was more like a space, I used like silence. So it's more like a space of the unknown. And and so really the point of that post was just to know that, like, adoptive parents, you might not have all the answers, and you might not have all the information all the time. And it might just mean that you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And we don't have to embellish the story to make it, I think the word I used was like superhuman. We don't have to like elevate it to be some superhuman hero narrative. We can be truthful. I don't know. So, and I feel like open adoption like gives more space for these conversations. And so I think that that's why it's like such a better alternative to a lot of the adoptions that were done in my generation. So I think it'll be really interesting to see these adoptees that are in open adoptions from like the 90s forward, coming into adulthood and sharing like their story and their experience, because I think that's when we're going to learn so much about how open adoption is affecting them on like a very personal level. So I'm excited about that, because I can't wait to learn like from them. I think that's going to be amazing.
I'm a little excited and nervous.
Everyone, I think that's normal.
I can't wait to see what my kids are going to write about me.
Well, and I think that's what's funny.
I'm going to stay quiet on that. I'm just going to leave that alone.
And I think what's really funny is that I feel, Vicki, I so feel you on that, because I know my mom, when I like started this, was just like, oh, what are you going to say about me? I'm like, I'm not going to say anything about you. I think you're amazing. Like, my mom is amazing. I describe her. I tell people like, my mom's my hero, not because she adopted me. My mom's my hero because she took all of this like anger and rage and questions and uncertainty and misplaced like frustration that was projected completely onto her, and she just like absorbed it. And that's what, to me, that's love. That's being a mom. And you're going to still, I may have misdirected anger to her, but she's still going to be there. She's still going to show up. We're still going to talk. She's still going to call me. And I just think that that's what being a parent. So that's what being a parent is, regardless if it's a biological child or adopted child. But when you have an adopted child, I think it's just like showing up and just being there. And, there's a lot of things my mom didn't know to ask, or just didn't ask because they just wanted a baby. And I'm allowed to be angry about that, but not angry at her. It's not like she did it wrong. I can just be angry at the situation. And I think that the more adoptive parents realize that like it's okay for your adoptee to be hurt and angry, they're not mad at you. Like they can be angry and frustrated with this whole circumstance. And they can be angry, and they can also be like incredibly grateful and happy and thrilled that you are their parents all at the same time. So it's super crazy. But I think, don't be nervous, Vicki. I'm sure it'll be, it'll be good.
I can probably tell my own bad stories about myself. It's fine. And I have a pretty good sense of humor. So a lot of stuff, and one of the things that we try to encourage adoptive parents, and even like anybody who's out there, whether you're a hopeful adoptive parent, already an adoptive parent, an adoption professional, I think you just you gotta leave room for questions. One of the things I'm like, I try to explain to people that my child can love me just as hard and as passionately as they can their birth parents. And it doesn't make me any less. And it doesn't make her or him any less. It's an intense love, but it's a different love. And I just try to explain it to people, like, how like in biological families, there is one aunt. It's not that your kid doesn't love all your brothers and sisters, but there's just that one. Like, if Spencer's watching, I'm his favorite aunt. We'll just put that out there, and there's just one, and so, but I've brainwashed him since he was a baby. He'll tell everybody that.
And there's the
but he, but it's not that he doesn't really love, but he just knows how silly I'll be with him. Do you know what I mean? But he loves the rest of my siblings just as much, but I just try to say, like, adults mess it up. Kids have the capacity to love everybody. Adults mess it up. So just kind of let them love that person deeply, and they can love you just as deeply. But that's a whole different conversation of dealing with
family.
Adoptive parents dealing with their own junk inside, and their fears.
Okay. So I want to go back to this post-adoption contact agreement. And
then after that, you got to ask your questions, or we're going to have a lot of women mad at us that submitted questions.
Yeah.
But I want to touch on this because I think it really is a brilliant point, and I think it's something I don't think there's an answer for. And anybody who's watching, if you want to, put in comments, your thoughts on it, we'd love to get your thoughts on it. But this whole idea of this post-adoption contact agreement, right? In Georgia, it's a binding court enforceable agreement. We won't get into the nitty gritty of it, but in other states, it's a memorandum of understanding. But it's this idea of how many times we're going to have visits, how many times we're going to exchange pictures and updates and all of that stuff. And Claire, your question of, well, when does my rights, when do I step up? Like, when do I get a say on, I want more visits, I want less visits, I want no visits, I want visits. When does the expectant mom, the birth mom's rights that she's agreed to regarding visitation, when does the adoptee, is there a certain age? Is there a certain moment where it's like, okay, she or he should have input in this too? And it's something that Vicki and I, play around with, because we have expectant moms when we're working with them and talking to them about their agreement. They're like, well, I want this to year 18. And we're like, well, I mean, yeah, in theory, that absolutely, we want that for you. But at 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, I mean, these kids start having their own brain and their own mind. And when do they get to have a say in that? So I want to throw that out at you, that big looming question, and get your thoughts as an adoptee.
Yeah. And so
if you can answer, give us a clear, succinct answer so we can just
that's right.
tie it all with a nice bow.
I think that in general, I think an age limit isn't going to be like appropriate, right? Because people and kids develop differently. And to me, I think it's hard because I don't know, like, the laws, like you said, like in Georgia, it's legally enforceable. And so it's like, can you really go against a legally enforceable contract if, say, a 15-year-old decided, I don't feel comfortable with you sending her pictures 3 times a year, like, can you actually stop, and in my mind, I feel like a post-placement contact agreement, did I say that backwards? Anyways, I feel like it should, and I don't know how, like I said, there's not a good answer. Like, I feel like there should be space for the adoptee in that agreement, meaning that no matter what age they begin to ask questions, or if they but if they request more visits, like, let's just say you get to see your birth mom 3 times a year. Maybe an adoptee says, you know what, I would really like to see them 4 times a year, 5 times a year. Like, I feel like in a true open adoption, you're working through that as a triad, meaning that you're working through that with your adoptee as well. We're no longer just limiting the decisions to the adoptive parents and the birth mother. and we're allowing the adoptee to have a say and voice their opinion. It doesn't mean that they get what they want all the time. It just means that we have room for it. And I think it's hard when you talk about agreements like this, because I think they're great, and I think that every state should have them, and I think every state should have legally enforceable ones, because I feel like most times it goes the other way, to where like you have an agreement and then all of a sudden someone's pulling back, whether that's the birth mother or the adoptive parent. And so I think it's probably a little easier when you talk from the aspect of wanting like more, maybe. I think it'd be a much different conversation if you have an adoptee say that wants less. And that could be, I could see it. I mean, I could see a lot of reasons why adoptees would pull back, just varying circumstances like I could think of. But I think also there's not an issue. It's kind of like a weird thing that I see. And it's with these agreements, right? And so in these agreements where the adoptive parents are sending pictures, they're sending updates, they're feeding all of this information to the birth mother.
Mm-hmm.
But I, as an adoptee, always wonder, like, it seems so one-sided, and like, I would love the information fed back. You know what I mean? And so, meaning like, I want to know what she was up to. I want pictures of her. Like, and so I think that I don't think that that's going to be possible in all circumstances, because of what Vicki was saying. Like, some of the population is already so like, they're already feeling shame, and they're feeling they're not in a healthy place, et cetera, et cetera. So those, I don't think that there'd be an option where they would like, oh yeah, let me send you an update, my life is so, like, they're not gonna want to do that. But I think that I could see adoptees, and I didn't have this because I didn't have an open adoption, but I could see a time and space where, especially in the social media generation, where we feel a little slighted, to where our privacy and like our story and our life has been like shared and communicated in our mind to our birth mother, but you could say anybody, and we didn't have any control in what was being shared and the cadence that it was being shared. And so, especially if we're not getting anything in return. And so I think that all adoptees to some level want to know where they come from. And so I don't know. I just think that the post-adoption contact agreement should honor both sides as much as all three sides, but the relationship as much as possible from both perspectives. And that's not an answer, but that's just my opinion.
But I mean, okay, so what are some ideas of how to do that? I mean, could we, Vicki, do you think that, like, in talking to an expectant mom as we're putting together this post-adoption contact agreement, how do you think you could sit there and say, hey, you know, if they're going to be sending you pictures, you know, once a month, how do you feel about sending pictures to them of you, or like things that have been going on with you for the last 3 months, so that they can keep that for her? Is that something that you think that you're...
That's a great idea. I honestly hadn't thought of it, but I think it's a great idea. And I guess I don't think of it as much, like, I try to take things I've learned from my own children and put it back into the situations. You know, like, one of the things my kid, like, I mean, Jared at 4 years old was like, hey, I want to see a picture of me and mommy so-and-so's belly. And I was like, baby, I don't have one. And he's like, he looked at me like I had 5 heads. And, you know, so it's one of those things now that I always try my best to make sure at least 1 to 2 ultrasound pictures go with the adoptee. You know, so I've learned a lot from my kids to try to, like, we have in our social medical, we ask what their favorite color is, what their favorite food is, what their favorite comfort food is, you know, what their favorite dessert is, what their favorite TV show is, you know, what subject did you hate in school? Like, we do all this stuff trying to, and a lot of that comes from questions my own kids have asked me. I mean, my daughter was 4 years old and she wanted to know if her birth mom liked sushi. And I'm like, I have no idea. And she's like, text her.
And I'm like, the thing is that people assume that things like that sound so trivial, like, oh, favorite color.
Oh, no,
but they're not. Yeah, they mean so much to an adoptee, so much. I can't even tell you that when I eventually discovered my birth mother's name and like did my like super sleuthing on the internet, like I found out that she's like this incredibly successful businesswoman. And I'm just like, what? Like I have a career in finance and I like love my career and I've worked so hard, and like a lot of that comes from my parents, but like it was just so cool to see that we share like some similarities, like even like looks. I had never seen a picture until like 2 years ago of anyone that looked like me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such a gift to have that. And I do think that that's something I really like, that idea of making sure that we have the foundation for the adoptee. So when they start asking the questions, we can say, well, here's a picture of your birth mother. Or, you know, even if it's in the post-placement contact agreement, if she doesn't want to do like every 3 months an update, like let's just do the whole annual, like, you know, what happened this year, what trips did you go on, what's your like did you move or did you get a dog, I don't know, just like like, you know, life things, like the normal boring life things. The other thing that I think is really important is a handwritten note. Because handwriting, I don't know if you, I mean, I feel like I would give so much to just see her handwriting. Like what
I
if,
thought about that.
yeah, like what does her handwriting look like? Just even like a signature, I don't know, just that sounds, but little things like that end up meaning like a lot. Especially when I think when you're maybe like younger and you don't have that like tangible, if you're not able to actually like meet them in person, you at least have these little pieces of them. And it kind of diminishes some of that mystery, I think, in a way.
No, and I mean, my son, I hope to keep, he knows I use him all the time, but when he was 11 was the first time he got a letter from his birth father. And I will never forget. I mean, I'm not going to go into the story because I'll be sitting here squalling here, but just him reading that letter and sitting on the couch with me beside him and him saying, I know where I get my love of water from. I know where I get, you know what I mean? Like that was huge for him, huge, to know how similar he was to his birth father. Yep. And I will never forget that, like how that impacted him. I mean, it was amazing watching him, and I wish I had given it. I wish I could have been able. It's not that I didn't want to, but I wish I could have been able to give it to him sooner. So I wonder, like, what if we did something like some kind of, not to be cheesy, but some kind of like life book, like from our birth parents, like, because you can make those digital books now, you know, where they can comment and put stuff, and maybe like us start investing. Because one of the things, I know pictures are important. One of the things that Abiding Love does is, if the mama will let us, we have a professional photographer come into the hospital and take pictures of just her and the baby. And she gets, I mean, every picture. If 200 pictures were taken that day, 200 pictures is what she gets. And then we also make them available to the adoptive family. And so, but I love the idea of like helping them. I'm not crafty. So Carrie, you're gonna have to take that over. So
oh no, we're adding to my list.
The way that
we could send, saying, instead of just that form and that little narrative that we write, but some little book that we could send that shows who they are, their personality, you know, and those things that because what we do right now, we write a little narrative and we send that with all that stuff we were telling you about that's in there, hoping that the adoptive parents are going to keep it and hoping that they're going to share this with their child. And when they get asked a question, they have it to refer back to. But how cool would it be if we did have maybe like some, not all of our moms have access to baby pictures or something like that, but that could actually be a really cool thing to start sending forward if they're willing to do it.
The way that I equate it is that when we're telling adoptive parents to go through the process, we make them have a profile book, right?
Yeah.
So I think of it very similar, that not that you're going to be like presenting a birth mother, but instead of framing it like that, it's like, this is a part of you, your story for your child.
Exactly.
Because you might not always be accessible, to them for whatever reason, right? If it's not 100% like open to where you can't just like
Right.
picture on the phone or something like that, you at least will have that. Because I mean, I've never seen a picture of me as a baby, like with I don't even know if one exists. I don't even know if there is a picture of me with my birth mother as a child. I don't even know if she held me. I don't know any of that stuff. But I mean, like, what a gift that is to not only the mother, but also to the child to just have that forever. I think that would just be awesome. And I think that gives the adoptee, even though they're not probably named in those like post adoption contracts as like a deciding party, I think that at least gives them the ability to have or feel like they have some like control, or they're also getting the benefit, right? And so if they choose to like see that information or ask for that information, like it's there. So that's just I think that's a
I
great
like it. I think it's something we need to do, and I think it's something that we need to be. I mean, I don't want to be like it has to be a 3-ring binder, but something that we can continue to
No binders. Let's not be ridiculous. Or tabs.
love binders and tabs. It brings me joy.
Love binders and tabs.
Hey, you should talk to Lori on our team. She really loves binders and
No,
tabs.
I'm thinking like one of those butterfly books or something.
I mean, she walks into office supply and she gets all excited. So anyway, I don't understand that. But now it needs to be something that we can keep adding to, because if we do that like every year, okay, this is what happened, to me, so we can add that to the adoptees book and keep saying, keep the story growing. So I like it. And I see, this is what happens when all of us come to the table together and for how can we change it? I mean, we want to change it. So I think that's brilliant. And now Vicky's going to make me write policies and procedures regarding this. And
I'm just going to have you set up an account. So all I have to do is drop stuff in.
Yeah.
Like a Shutterfly book. I just drop it in.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wonder too,
Claire. I'm just kidding.
I wonder too, though, if there's, I know there's like companies and stuff that do this kind of stuff for adoptive parents. Like, I wonder if there's people, maybe if you watch this and you have one of these companies that would either like volunteer or like donate resources to do this, because I feel like it's very important. And I feel like, as an adoptee, if I come to your agency when I'm 18 and I'm allowed to get this information, that I want more than a piece of paper that says, here's her name. I want like a picture and this, that, and I want all this stuff, especially if my picture and my information has been shared. So
well, in the birth mother narrative that Vicky was talking about, Vicky and I've gone round and round on that, because me, the attorney, I'm like, well, the birth mother narrative, I need this and this and this in it because I need it for the court, or I need it for ICPC. They're going to be looking for X, Y, and Z. And then Vicky's like, yeah, but when she's at some age, she's going to be reading that, and so I want to be sensitive about how things are worded, and to make sure. And it is hard, and I know, like, when I'm in court and I'm finalizing an adoption or terminating parental rights, I hate the language that I have to use regarding the surrender and stuff, because it's what the law requires. And so usually, afterwards, after I do all the formal stuff, I just sit there and say, Judge, let me tell you about her. Let me tell you how amazing she is. Because I just feel like the words just are so cold. And so, but I liked your idea regarding it. I think that's a good idea of how we could present it to our expectant moms, Vicky, of, okay, you've seen the couple's profile book. So now it's our turn to create something that we can then give to, your son or your daughter. So I think that's a good way of explaining it. And I like the idea of seeing if we can get some of these companies that is what they do, of profile books, because that is not what we do.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Seeing if they might, a pro bono or some way help us to create that. But I think also your idea, I would love to have a folder in there so that we can put a handwritten letter having that. I think that's good. A lot of our expectant moms, I'm working with one right now, and she, we give them journals, and their journaling basically, is her letter to her daughter every day. It's like, okay, this is what's going through my heart. This is why, I'm doing this. This is the good of it. This is the bad of it, all those things. So I think it would be neat if they would be willing to share those. Sometimes they just need a private place to keep them. And we want to respect that. But if we could have at least one letter that they would write or something to have that handwritten, I think that's a good idea. So, okay, questions. Let me get my.
Now you get to be in the hot seat.
Yay.
Okay, so we have birth mother support groups going on, right? Love our birth mother support groups. We got one tonight. And so what I did is we have like a little private messenger thing. And I asked them, I was like, hey, I am talking with Claire today, and what questions would you as a birth mom like to ask an adoptee? And so one of our moms asked the question of, do you see us being birth moms, do you see us as equal moms, as equal to like your adoptive mom?
So I think that yes and no, right? And so there's like a both and. For me, this is my personal opinion. I don't have a relationship with my birth mother. And so I think that this will look very different if you have an open relationship,
right?
So where they are on more equal footing. I think that I look at my birth mother, I've had very different views of her throughout my life. I look at her now with a better understanding and more empathetic view than I think I ever have. Because I have gone through the process of like having my own children and the whole like birth experience, all of that stuff. And I think that I think we view them differently, right? Is that like I have a different respect and admiration and love for my birth mother than I do my adoptive mother, and vice versa. And that can change, I think, throughout a lifetime, right? And I think for me right now, it's a hard question for someone like me to answer because I don't know my birth mother, but I definitely like have very deep love for her. I just haven't been given the opportunity to like express that to her. I think that adoptees in general, I think for the most part, we view our birth mothers with like empathy and love and caring and, like all of those types of emotions. But I do think there are pockets of sadness and sometimes anger that adoptees can feel. And I think ignoring those aspects of it is hard because I think sometimes we see our adoptive parents and, I won't sugarcoat this part of it, but like we see our adoptive parents and let's just say a majority of adoptions, you're placed out of like a need, right? And so you're usually going to be placed with a family that is in a stable place in their life. They're ready to parent. We won't get into like resources and opportunity and like all of those other things that like trickle down in adoption. And so it's easy to view through like an adoptee lens of all of this that was given to me because I was adopted. But we always carry our birth mother with us. I will always carry her with me. There's not like one thing in my life that I have that isn't because of her. And so I don't know if like equal is the right word for that relationship, because she couldn't be there, right? Like she couldn't be there to be like the equivalent of my adoptive mom. Like she wasn't capable at that time to do what my adoptive mother could. And so equal might not be the right word, but there's, like I said, I wouldn't have life if not for her, but and
she might be capable, but you know, the thing is the roles are different. And
Right. Yeah. That's
I'm sure you want to add on that, because I mean, we talk a lot with our expectant moms and our adopted parents about boundaries. I mean, boundaries are so important, and the roles that everybody is playing is different. You know, and that doesn't mean it always sinks in, but you know, it's important that the role of an expectant mom is different than the role of your mom that
my
is,
mom.
you know, changing diapers daily, and you know, there when you come home and your boyfriend broke up with you. I'm sure your boyfriend never broke up with you, but you know what I'm saying.
I married my high school boyfriend, so
there you go. I did not.
yeah, and I think that's what I think it's like. That's why I said like equal isn't the right term, because the roles are so different and what everyone brings to the table is different, and it goes through different seasons and different needs. And I just think that remembering that an adoptee is capable of loving their adoptive mom, their mom, and their birth mother, however they choose to call her, I mean, birth mother, first mother, etc. But yeah, like we have the capability of loving both. And it's just different. It's not bad or, you know, better or worse. It's just different. Yeah.
Different.
Yeah.
Vicki, anything you want to add? You're being very quiet. Concerns me.
No, they're just cutting grass around me, so I didn't want to like come on Zoom and hear this kind of thing. No, I think that it's I kind of already said the same thing earlier. I mean, you know, there are going to be things that I have to be secure in my role in my son's life, in my daughter's life, in my other son's life, you know, and know who I am to them, so that they have the freedom to love without guilt, you know, and love everybody. And so, but you know, that also goes for our birth moms, because our birth moms, if they are having a hard time healing and they're not dealing with their grief, then they can spin a different story too, where it's like, oh, he should love me more because I am his biological mom, you know. And then it gets into, and that can make weird visits, you know, because nobody should put putting pressure on the adoptee. That's just kind of my whole thing. Like, nobody should be saying you should love me more, or you should love me more, and nobody should be walking in fear. I think one of our biggest roles, I guess, as a professional, and even as adoptive moms and birth moms, is we have to let the adoptee be, and just let them love and let them figure out and let them identify with their birth parents in a special way, and let them identify with us in a special way, because otherwise I don't think the adoptee and him or herself is going to be healthy. And I think that's the responsibility of the birth mom and the adoptive family, because, or birth parents and the adoptive family, because if my child doesn't get affirmation from their birth parents that I really am the parent, then it's going to cause confusion, and it's going to cause unnecessary drama. I do decide, you know, my kids don't watch SpongeBob. One of my birth parents thinks that's crazy, but my kids don't watch SpongeBob, you know, and and that's a silly, and but see, those are the things we try to talk to also with our birth moms. We're like, you know, I mean, if they don't want your kid to eat sweets, when y'all go on a visit, you can't be sliding them candy bars. You know, I mean, you've got to respect the role of the adoptive parent, but they also need to respect your role also. And so it's the biggest thing, in at least in openness, and even honestly, I mean, I work with so many women now who were a part of those adoptions back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And I know these women, and they would give anything. A lot of them would give anything to be able to meet their child. And then there's some who have met their child and the reunion didn't go like they had fantasized. And that's caused all kinds of extra drama and tore open wounds. And I think that's where, again, adoption professionals, or like when I was reading on your blog, like to have mental health professionals who are truly equipped to counsel birth parents. And it's a specialized field. It's just like being an attorney. It's like whatever, you know, it's a specialized field. And I think equally, like, the birth parents need to not have a fantasy of what reunification will look like, you know. And it's a lot of stuff that we're just going to have to dig out of. But I think where it comes from is the openness, and not necessarily like open adoption, but just even now in your situation and older adoptee situations, is everybody has to extend grace. And I mean, you know, because even if you did get to meet your birth mom, who's to say that y'all would connect instantly? And, you know, I mean, maybe you would, maybe you'd have to work really hard at it, because maybe she never dealt with her grief.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, and so, because back then she wasn't supposed to, she was supposed to pretend like nothing happened.
Oh yeah. And I think that that's really important, is that the expectations regarding everyone's roles is important to like be clear on, especially as adoptions are more open now. I think like we have said, with closed adoption, it's a little easier. Not better, easier, because your expectations, there are none, because you don't have the information, or you don't have contact, or you're not dealing with everyone's needs, you know. But yeah, so that's a really roundabout way to answer the question, but hope that helped.
Well, I think it's also important, it just reiterates how important it is for all of us to, it's our responsibility to make sure that we're, from all parts of the triad, that everybody is coming to the table as healthy as possible. So for prospective adoptive parents, you know, one of the things that we're passionate about in home studies is making sure we've worked through their own grief. You know, many people, prospective adoptive parents that are pursuing adoption, there's some that just feel called to adopt, and that's great. But there's many that couldn't have children, that had miscarriages, that have infertility. And if you don't deal with that grief beforehand, and when you come to the table, it's going to project onto your child's birth mom, and it's going to project onto your child. And we've got to make sure that, you know, our job of working with the birth mom and expectant mom before she even places, and then well afterwards, that we're working through the grief that she is walking through, and not just sitting there and saying, hey, just pretend it didn't exist, just put it under the rug, but working through it. And I feel like what you're saying is we need to be also making sure that we're doing that with you. And so, because if those two can come, then you're going to be in a place where you're going to be raised in a healthier position, and making sure that you're coming to the table when you are of that age to make those decisions, whether or not you want more or less or none, or whatever, visits and contact. So we've created a healthy environment for you to be raised in. And that, does that sound about right?
Oh yeah, I agree with all of that.
So, okay, other questions? Let's see. We're going to have to end this soon, because then nobody will watch it, right? But so I love chatting with you. So yeah,
Maybe there's a breaking point where you can divide the video.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Part 1, part 2. I think just a general question. I think this is a good general question to kind of end all of it. But, you know, what would you want your birth mom to know?
Oh, so much. I think that if I could go back and see her and talk to her when she was making her decision, I would just want to tell her that whatever you decide is going to be fine. It's going to be the right decision. I will be okay. And that she was loved and that she mattered, because I think that in my experience, in my specific story, I don't think that she thought that she mattered. And no matter the circumstance. So I don't care if you are a expectant mother that, like Vicki said, that you're struggling in your life right now, that you might drugs, drinking, jail, like whatever, like let's just think of the worst possible scenarios that you can. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. I think that I would just want her to know that she mattered. Her life matters. And this choice you're making, whatever you decide, whether that's making a placement or parenting, we will be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that, I don't know if that would have helped her or comforted her, but I don't think she had support, and I don't think that she had that person there for her. And so I think as an adoptee, we want our birth mothers to understand that we do love them, and that we are not only like thriving because of the choice that they made, but we're thriving in part because of their ability to like make this choice. I don't know if that makes sense. Like their ability to make this choice, like their ability to, they're in this crisis, right? They're in this like whirlwind of uncertainty, and they have enough clarity to sit down and think about us, whether that's a placement or not, placement or parenting, that they truly, it is a very selfless, and I'll use the word brave, even though it's very selfless and brave act what they're doing. And I just I would just want her to know that, yeah, you matter to me.
I love that. What would you say, what do you have to say for us adoption professionals on what we can do better?
So I think that, and I think that from what I can tell about you guys, you operate a little differently than what I'm traditionally used to. But I think that the more adoption professionals can humanize not only the expectant mother, but also the adoptee. I know that that's really difficult because we're not born, right? We're not here. We're not like a living, breathing baby that's there most of the time. We're talking about domestic infant adoption, sometimes toddler adoption, foster care, all of that stuff. But domestic infant adoption, we're not there yet. And so I think that it's easier to talk about like generalities and things like that. And I just think the more that adoption professionals can humanize us and see us as people that will grow up and have different needs throughout our life cycle, and how adoption professionals can advocate, right, for everyone in the triad. And I think what I like about your agency is that you are like expectant mother focused. I think that that's
strength and our greatest weakness.
but I mean, to me, that's step one, right? So you can't have a healthy, you probably have heard me say this. I say it almost every time I talk to people. You cannot have a healthy adoptee if their mother or father, birth parents, were not taken care of.
That's right.
I will go as far to say, and people might not like me for this, I say it is almost impossible to have a healthy adoptee. Not meaning that we're not productive. I'm a very productive citizen, but I have a lot of, unresolved grief, loss, anxiety, things like that come from this place of just this frustration with knowing that my personal story, my birth mother wasn't cared for. And so I think that the more adoption professionals can do to care for them, just the better off everyone's going to be. And that might come at a cost. It might.
But that's our job, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. And I think that sometimes, yeah, it is. And I think sometimes though, I mean, I know you see it. I know both of you see it. I think sometimes we forget that. I think sometimes the industry forgets who they're supposed to be serving. And
maybe one of the reasons why, well, one of the many, I'm getting political and everything, but the reasons I can't stand facilitators and facilitation is because, and I mean, there are some attorneys out there that are providing, wraparound services and care. I know I was one of them until I, started Abiding Love. But a lot of times it's transactional. And this is not a transaction at all.
No.
You are not a transaction. You are not a commodity. You are not a product. You are a live human being. And God made you. And we've got to focus on loving you and loving you well by loving her and loving her well, and preparing the prospective adoptive parents to deal with their stuff before they come to the table, so that when it's time, they can love her and love her well as you.
Yep. Because I think that you guys, meaning adoption professionals, are setting this foundation and dictating a lot of where the relationship is going to go. I know that every party has free will, right? But like at the end of the day, I don't know if it was you or Vicky that said this, but when
If it was good, it was Vicky.
Yeah, when an expectant parent is coming to you, they're looking to you as the expert. And they don't know about people like adult adoptees necessarily that are sharing their story. They might not know about birth mothers that are sharing their story. They come to you and they want you to tell them, am I making the right decision? How do I make this decision? And it's a little scary, some of the stuff that I see. I know you guys see it too. And my heart goes to those expectant mothers, but my first instinct is like, I go to the adoptee and I'm like, oh, could you imagine being a child relinquished under this narrative and then having to like grow up and start asking the questions and realizing a lot of this predatory stuff that we're seeing. And so, yeah, I think that's adoption professionals, that's what they can do. They can bring back a little bit of the humanity into the transaction, because there are a lot of things, like you said, there's court dates, there's filings, there's paperwork, there's all of this stuff that is transactional. But at the end of the day, that's like a means to an end, right? You're getting all of that done, but it's really the relationship that you're building that's going to have to sustain like for this lifetime. And so, yeah, but that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Claire. Thanks for hanging out with us two crazy people. And we're so excited what God's doing through you and through your platform on social media. And thanks for being a voice. Thanks for being willing to come to this space and being open and transparent and, opening wounds in front of everybody. And thank you. It means a lot to us. We're very blessed to have you.
I had fun. Anytime you guys want to talk adoption, I'm here.
So many topics. So many. Yeah. We'll have fun.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.